Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, and to those of you joining us online, good evening. It is my first time speaking at the MacGill Summer School, and I am delighted to be here amongst you. It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves, from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. We have been analysing the state of the Irish Indigenous sector, how to grow it, how to bolster it, how to globalise it for quite some time. And quite some time is 36 years. In 1982, we were so concerned about our dependence on foreign direct investment. 70% of our goods exports came from foreign companies. To compare that with last year, it was 84% in 2017. But such was our concern that we commissioned an American consultancy company, Telesis, to undertake a review and to take a look at us. 10 years later, we were still concerned, and we had the well-known Culleton report, which came forward with suggestions. Another 10 years later, the O'Driscoll report, and so on and so forth, more reports until the present day. But what is startling about all of this is that report after report and year after year, for most of those 40 years, we have identified the same challenges for Irish business, and we have broadly come forward with the same solutions. And what's holding us back, as Alan has just pointed out, is all too familiar. Managerial capacity, finance to invest in employees and skills and innovation, in research and development. And the problem is, as he pointed out, these are not just any factors. They are the game changers that change companies across the world, and they're the game changers that change economies. So thinking about today's theme, I concluded that we're not short on policies and plans, but rather that Ireland could do well to listen to the greatest management guru in the world, Peter Drucker, who said, strategy is a commodity, the execution is in the art, the translation being it's high time for action. Yes, we've had great Irish companies, people who've trailblazed the world and companies that we're proud of, and we've made huge strides in financial services, medical devices, food ingredients and fintech, to name but some. But the diagnosis from the biggest organisations around the world, from the IMF to the OECD, is that Ireland needs to up its game on its businesses. Why? The productivity of our Irish firms is declining. By and large, they are not particularly profitable. And for a country with the biggest tech names in the world on our doorstep, we have one of the lowest levels of basic digital skills amongst our population in the entire EU. Yes, global turbulence gives urgency to the issue. The fact that our two largest trading partners, the UK and the US, are involved makes us concerned. And the sheer scale of US involvement in our economy makes us nervous at just a breeze, let alone a storm. The top 10 largest corporate tax-paying companies in this country, 51 of them are American, and just over 10 are Irish. So regardless of turbulence, we owe it to ourselves and our future generations to pave the way for an innovative and dynamic and resilient Ireland once and for all. And we have other reasons too. The demands on our exchequer and our funds. The jewel in our crown, our third-level universities need investment, and we've heard the cries for funding in the last few weeks in particular. We need housing, we need transport, we need infrastructure for Brexit. We have no choice but to look at new actions that will give depth to our tax base and our economy. And we must ask, where does the future lie? The World Economic Forum says we stand on the brink of a technological revolution. Its scale, scope, complexity will be unlike anything mankind has experienced before, and it will be driven by technology. So where from here? Talent, innovation, adaptability are the ingredients that will allow us to grasp the opportunities. And they are the ingredients that the most successful companies in the world are relentlessly and obsessively focused on. Sweden, Denmark and Germany, and those who are racing to compete with them from France to Japan. Such is the change of technology in the fourth industrial revolution and what it will unleash in businesses, that Germany has set up what's called Platform Industry 4.0, the largest network of its kind ever, to help their SMEs manage digital transformation. But we can draw lessons from these exceptional economies and high-performing countries because they weren't always so. Stockholm in Sweden is the poster child of innovation and has been transformed in just 1 decade. But how? It had a financial crisis in the 1990s, and it shocked it into making huge economic changes. The first thing they did was dismantle the hurdles to entrepreneurship. They made tax changes, including ones to level the gap between large companies and small ones. And then what did they do next? They gave tax breaks to every company in Sweden to give their employees a computer. But there was one condition. Every employee had to get one from the security guard to the chief executive. They primed the nation and the next generation of entrepreneurs to think digitally. And the Swedish story is not an attempt to compare or to criticise, but to show the irrefutable evidence that focus, action and nimble action can lead to positive results. And yes, we have our own success stories too that show us the way. Our FDI model, our world-class medical devices sector, our financial services sector, and as you know here in Donegal, the recent crafting of a high-growth tourism strategy showed that focus, intent and action led to results. But the bottom line is broadly we need to get moving. The OECD came with their analysis of Ireland to our country last March, and they told us 2 things. We need to give entrepreneurs what they need to grow, and we need to get rid of what's stunting their growth. So what kind of action do we need, you ask quite rightly, and there's a large breadth of it. But as I work with the Irish Tax Institute, I will use a number of tax examples to show you what I mean. And they're not just any examples, these are tax issues that are impacting those game-changing factors that we've just spoken about. And Alan has said finance is one of them. People need finance to invest in their employees, in their skills, in innovation, in long-term capital thinking. And we're more reliant on banks than anywhere else in the EU. We have a shortage of internal and external finance, and it's hampering innovation. And in Germany, when they borrow for skills, for their employees and for capital investment. Worryingly in Ireland, when firms borrow, in the main they borrow for day-to-day working capital. We're crying out for alternative finance, venture capitalists and angel investors, the people who take the risky investments, who take the chance and who back the startup and the disruptive companies. But it's hard to believe that Ireland's tax regime blocks out in its relief system angel investors and venture capitalists. While Tokyo, Paris and Berlin and London say, please come on in. The president of Japan, Shinzo Abe, visited Silicon Valley some years ago. He was concerned that they didn't have enough investment in their startups. The sector was sluggish and the activity was coming from their large corporates, but they couldn't get the activity in the startup sector that they wanted. And the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs made it clear to him, you need to loosen up your investment in venture capitalism and angel investment if you're going to change your economy. He returned and Japan worked on its tax regime. The president of Japan said, smart money, because it's not just money for companies. We're looking for global experience. We're looking for their contact book and their unbridled enthusiasm for startup and success. And the story of angel investors and venture capitalists is best told by what is deemed to be the most important technology company that ever came out of Ireland, Movidius. 11 years ago, 3 young men, geniuses, designed and sketched the design for a microchip for the semiconductor industry on a menu in a Dublin craft beer pub. And they knew that it had groundbreaking potential. But as is the case for startups, they didn't have managerial capacity. They were geniuses, but they weren't so sure how to run a company. And they were also on the verge of bankruptcy. Their initial investors were fleeing, and those who were enthusiastic couldn't keep pumping money into the company month after month and taking the risk. So what happened next? A new group of venture capitalists came along and saw what was possible with the microchip. They brought business experience, managerial know-how, and worldwide connections as far as China in tech. They changed the chief executive of the company, not because he wasn't great, but because his experience was as a tech designer and not the CEO of a company. The rest is history. The company, which has hundreds of people around the world, including in Dublin, was sold for $400 million to Intel in 2016. And that brings me to the sale of companies as the next blocker to the future of our country. Our capital gains tax is the third highest in the world. Last year we were fourth, a slightly improved position. But President Macron came along and he's trying to drive investment into the tech sector in France and into Paris in particular, and in one fell swoop knocked 20 percentage points off their capital gains tax. Because investing in startups is a risky business and risk needs reward, and Culleton told us it back in 1992. High rates hinder investment in the buying and selling of businesses. Germany, with its great big Mittelstand, where they need generational change and they're going to get it in droves soon because the third generation are retiring, said sales are critical. In every article I read about Sweden, they boast of their billion-dollar company sales. Skype, Spotify, and the creators of the well-known game Candy Crush are amongst the most famous. It's a source of pride in other countries, but it's a sentiment that we struggle to embrace in Ireland. The fact that more often than not, the seller of the company reinvests in the economy and mentors the startups and disruptive companies of tomorrow is not recognised in our tax code. And it's all connected. Those startups and disruptors are the people we need to innovate. We need them, and we can't have enough of them, because the IMF and the European Commission and all the research tells us that the great innovation is coming from the small, young companies. The great big German giant Siemens is obsessed with buying and marrying and twinning with the smallest, most disruptive companies in Germany and elsewhere in the world because it believes that's where its future is going to come from. And it doesn't matter whether it's in Dublin or Dortmund, they are the people who are creating the change. We have a good R&D tax regime in Ireland, but 70% of the spend on that regime and the claims from it are coming from foreign companies. So we need Irish companies to do more. And there have been a lot of improvements in the regime for SMEs recently, and we welcome it. But only after years of calling for change because it's complex, it's costly, and it's burdensome. And I tell the story. In the last 12 months, I went to 2 major Brexit events in this country, one in Carrick-on-Shannon and one in Dublin. 2 young men in their 40s who were exporters stood up separately and unbeknownst to each other and told a packed house of 500 people, I can't use the R&D tax regime in this country. It's complex, it's paperwork heavy, and it's too difficult and it's too costly. One was an exporter of sophisticated engineering equipment in a border county, and the other was an exporter of engineering vehicles from East Galway. They're the companies we're asking to diversify, to sell more, to find new markets. They're the companies we're asking to be Brexit ready while we put blockers at their factory door. And how do we innovate and get more ready for the world markets and new products? It's through innovation, but through innovation is collaboration. Because when Shinzo Abe went to Silicon Valley, they told him no company and no country is great enough to do it on their own. The sharing of knowledge and technology is where the future will be. Collaboration is king in Germany, to the degree that the wider you network and the more you collaborate, not just in Germany but outside your own country, the greater the incentive. It's a bonus system and it works. To Ireland's credit, we're making great strides with collaboration. Universities, research institutes and industry are doing more together with more funding, and it's improved significantly, and good work is being done by many. And for our young companies, that collaboration is really important. They don't have the scale, the size, the money, the expertise in the small company to do it on their own. But again, there's a glitch. Our R&D tax credit regime in Ireland restricts outsourcing and collaboration severely and is a condition that is at odds with the best practice internationally. To echo what Alan has just said, in the great global race to be the best, there is one standout factor: people. Talent more than capital will be the critical factor of production in the future, and it's the new global currency. But there's a problem, there's a shortage of supply. There's a 20% gap in the amount of people that are needed for ICT alone, communications technology, across Europe. And every country is chasing the same engineers, the same techies, and the same software skills. Irish SMEs need those people too to make a breakthrough to scale, but they're under pressure in Ireland. Multinationals pay a higher wage, 64% to 74% higher than the domestic company can pay. Irish SMEs don't have the money to match. And there is a solution: a share options regime that allows them to give key hires a piece of the company. I can't afford to hire you. I know you're a brilliant software engineer and we're on the start of our journey, but I can give you a piece of the company. And if we succeed like Movidius, there will be a share for you too. Last year, after years of calling for it by entrepreneurs, Ireland introduced a new share options regime called the Key Employee Engagement Programme. But the rules are so restrictive that many Irish companies can't even use it. And finally, we need to put a halt to the burdens on business. Some EU countries have a great rule in recent years. One in, one out. If you make a change that puts a burden on the company, you take another one out. It stands in stark contrast to the problems facing Ireland SMEs in the coming months. The Revenue Commissioners are about to unveil one of the greatest changes in the tax administration system, and it's called PAYE modernisation, and it will affect every company from those of 2 employees to 2,000. The UK, on introducing a similar scheme some years ago, recognised that small companies would struggle with such change and such software, and introduced a free payroll software for businesses. Despite the issue being raised month after month on the agenda in Ireland, there is yet no give on the same measure. So if we want to get serious about changing Ireland's Indigenous business, then we better get serious about acting too. Exports from Irish firms that are at an all-time high, but the growth in the exciting area, the tech, the ICT, the modern manufacturing are coming from a relatively low base. So as the world stands on the brink of a new industrial revolution driven by technology, we must grasp the chances and we must grasp and get a handle on the change. After 36 years, we can only conclude that there is nothing standing in the way of changing Irish business apart from Ireland itself. It's time to back our brightest and our bravest. It's time to back Irish business. The catch cry from the Glenties is, yes, you can. But the roar from Leinster House must be, yes, we will. Thank you very much.